Have you ever picked up a dirty old penny and wondered whether it could be worth more than its 1 cent face value? If you have been spending your Lincoln cents without looking closely at the dates, mint marks, surfaces, and unusual details, you may be overlooking coins that deserve a second look. Today, we are focusing on coin number 1, the 1973 Lincoln cent from the United States of America. At first glance, a worn or dirty 1973 penny may look completely ordinary, especially if it has been sitting in a drawer, buried in loose change, dropped on the ground, or covered with years of grime. But coin collecting is all about the details. A date alone does not automatically make a coin rare or extremely valuable, and a dirty appearance does not automatically mean that a coin is worthless. The real excitement begins when you learn how collectors examine these coins and search for unusual characteristics, errors, varieties, and exceptional condition. So before you throw that old 1973 penny into a tip jar or spend it at a checkout counter, take a moment to look at it carefully, because you never know what details might be hiding beneath the dirt. The 1973 Lincoln cent belongs to an important period in American coinage history. By this time, the Lincoln cent had already been part of everyday American life for more than half a century. The Lincoln cent design, introduced in 1909, had become one of the most recognizable coin designs in the United States, and millions of Americans encountered these little copper-colored coins every day. On the obverse, you will see the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right, surrounded by inscriptions including Liberty and In God We Trust, with the date 1973 positioned below Lincoln. On the reverse of the standard 1973 cent, the familiar Lincoln Memorial appears at the center, surrounded by United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and the denomination 1 cent. If your coin is dirty, these details may be difficult to see clearly, but that is exactly why careful examination matters. Dirt can hide important characteristics, and years of circulation can make the surfaces look much less attractive than they originally did. However, collectors generally want to distinguish natural circulation, where from damage, cleaning, corrosion, environmental exposure, and other problems before deciding what a coin might be worth. Now here is where things become especially interesting. Not every 1973 Lincoln cent is rare, and most ordinary circulated examples are generally worth close to their face value. That is an important point because sensational claims about every old penny being worth thousands or millions can be misleading. The real value of a coin depends on factors such as rarity, condition, demand, authenticity, and whether it possesses a recognized error or variety. A 1973 cent that has been heavily circulated and damaged is very different from a sharply struck example preserved in exceptional condition. Two pennies can have exactly the same date and mint mark, yet have dramatically different values because their grades and characteristics are different. That is why experienced collectors do not simply look at the year and immediately declare a price. They inspect the entire coin. They study the lettering, numbers, Lincoln's portrait, the memorial building, the rim, the fields, and the surfaces. They also compare the coin with known examples and, when necessary, consult reputable grading services and numismatic references. If your 1973 penny is dirty, the first thing you should do is resist the temptation to aggressively clean it. This is one of the biggest mistakes beginners can make. Scrubbing, polishing, rubbing with a cloth, using chemicals, or attempting to make the coin shine can leave permanent marks on the surface. Even when a coin looks ugly because of dirt, its original surface may still contain information that collectors care about. Cleaning can create hairlines, scratches, unnatural brightness, or other signs of alteration that may reduce collector interest. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges and examine it under good lighting. A magnifying glass can help you inspect small areas, especially around the date, mint mark, lettering, and design elements. If you suspect something unusual, photograph both sides before doing anything else. Remember, the goal is not to make the coin look new. The goal is to determine what the coin actually is, and whether it has characteristics that make it interesting. One of the most important things to check on a 1973 Lincoln cent is the mint mark. Depending on where the coin was produced, you may find a mint mark beneath the date, while some cents from this era were struck at the Philadelphia Mint without a mint mark. A 1973 cent may therefore require careful attention to the area beneath the date. Do not assume that a missing mint mark is automatically an error. For coins struck at Philadelphia during periods when no mint mark was used, the absence of a mint mark is completely normal. This is an excellent example of why knowledge matters in coin collecting. Something that looks unusual to a beginner can be perfectly normal to an experienced collector. At the same time, genuine minting errors and varieties can exist, so the coin should still be examined carefully rather than dismissed immediately. If you notice an unusual feature, compare it with trustworthy references or seek an opinion from an experienced numismatist before believing a dramatic value claim. Another fascinating area to examine is the possibility of a minting error. Errors happen during the manufacturing process, although major errors can be considerably scarcer than ordinary coins. A coin might show an unusual strike, a misplaced design element, a significant die problem, or another recognized minting anomaly. But there is a crucial difference between an actual mint error and damage that happened after the coin left the mint. A scratch caused by a machine, a flattened edge from a coin counter, corrosion from the environment, or damage from someone deliberately altering the coin does not necessarily make it a valuable mint error. This distinction is extremely important when examining a dirty 1973 cent. Sometimes grime makes normal features appear strange, while corrosion can create shapes that look like errors. The best approach is patience. Look at the coin from multiple angles, use magnification, compare it with normal examples, and avoid jumping to conclusions based on one unusual mark. Condition is another major factor that can completely change the collecting interest of a 1973 cent. Imagine two pennies sitting side by side. Both are dated 1973, both have the same basic design, and both came from the United States Mint. One has spent decades circulating through countless hands, becoming scratched, worn, and dirty. The other has been carefully preserved with sharp details and minimal contact marks. To an untrained eye, they may simply look like two identical pennies. To a collector, however, the difference can be significant. The condition of a coin is evaluated through grading, and professional grading considers details such as wear, luster, strike quality, surface preservation, and overall appearance. Extremely high-grade examples can attract stronger collector interest, particularly when they are certified and meet the standards required for a top grade. But remember that not every shiny coin is high-grade. Artificially polished or cleaned surfaces can actually hurt a coin's desirability. There is also something else you should examine carefully: the surfaces of the coin. Look closely around Lincoln's portrait and the fields surrounding the design. On the reverse, examine the Lincoln Memorial and the lettering around it. Heavy wear will gradually flatten the highest points of the design, while scratches and contact marks can appear across the open fields. If the coin has been stored in a damp environment, it may develop discoloration or corrosion. Sometimes environmental damage can be mistaken for an interesting variety. This is why experienced collectors learn to recognize the difference between characteristics created at the mint and damage acquired afterward. A microscope or strong magnification can reveal tiny details, but technology should support knowledge rather than replace it. If something looks unusual, document it, compare it, and research it. That simple process can turn a random penny into a fascinating learning experience, even when the coin turns out to be ordinary. The story of the 1973 cent also reminds us that age alone does not determine rarity. A coin does not automatically become valuable simply because it is several decades old. Millions of coins from many years remain in collections, jars, drawers, and circulation. What makes a coin especially interesting is the combination of scarcity, condition, demand, and distinctive characteristics. This is why you should be careful whenever someone says that every 1973 penny is worth thousands of dollars. That claim would be misleading. Instead, think of your 1973 cent as a coin worth investigating. Maybe it is a normal circulated example. Maybe it has an interesting surface characteristic. Maybe it has an unusual minting feature that deserves professional examination. Or perhaps it is simply a wonderful piece of American history that has survived for more than 5 decades. Even when the monetary value is modest, the historical value and collecting story can still make the coin worth keeping. And now comes the part where you can become your own coin detective. Take your 1973 cent and place it under a bright light. Start with the date. Make sure it actually reads 1973 and that the numbers have not been altered. Next, inspect the area beneath the date for the mint mark. Then move across Lincoln's portrait, looking for unusual doubling, damage, or other characteristics. Turn the coin over and carefully examine the Lincoln memorial, the lettering, the denomination, and the rim. Compare both sides with photographs of normal 1973 cents from reliable numismatic references. If something genuinely unusual remains after comparison, do not immediately clean it or sell it to the first person who offers you money. Consider getting an opinion from a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service. Authentication and professional attribution can be especially important when a suspected rarity could potentially carry significant value. One of the most exciting things about searching through old coins is that you never know what you will discover next. A coin that looks dirty and insignificant may lead you into a fascinating story about American history, minting technology, collecting, and the evolution of currency. But the real treasure is not believing that every penny is a fortune. The real treasure is learning how to identify the exceptions. When you understand dates, mint marks, condition, errors, varieties, and grading, you become much better at separating ordinary coins from genuinely interesting ones. That knowledge can save you from falling for exaggerated claims and can also help you recognize a coin that deserves further investigation. So if you have a jar full of old pennies, do not dump them all into a machine without looking. Take your time. Sort them by date. Examine the unusual ones. Keep an eye out for condition and possible errors. Your chances of finding a spectacular rarity may be small, but the excitement of the search is real. And this is only coin number one. The 1973 Lincoln cent may look like an ordinary dirty penny, but it teaches us an important lesson. Never judge a coin before you examine it properly. Most examples will not be worth life-changing money, and that is perfectly normal. Coin collecting is built on patience, research, and careful observation. If you discover a 1973 cent with an unusual feature, remember to preserve it as you found it. Avoid harsh cleaning, take clear photographs, and compare it with reliable information before making any decisions. Now we move to coin number 2 in our exciting search through ordinary-looking United States pennies, and this time we are looking at the 1981 Lincoln cent. At first glance, a 1981 1-cent coin may appear completely ordinary, especially if the example in your hand is dirty, scratched, darkened, or heavily circulated. You might even be tempted to toss it back into your change jar without giving it another thought. But that is exactly the habit we want to change. Coin collecting is not about assuming that every old penny is a fortune. It is about knowing what to look for when a coin crosses your path. The 1981 Lincoln cent comes from an important era in American coinage, and while most circulated examples are common, certain characteristics, varieties, minting errors, and exceptionally preserved examples can make individual coins much more interesting to collectors. So before you spend that 1981 penny, take a few seconds to inspect it carefully, because the small details are where the real story begins. The Lincoln cent had already been a familiar part of American life for more than 7 decades by 1981. Millions of these coins were produced for everyday commerce, passing through stores, vending machines, cash registers, pockets, purses, and countless hands. The obverse features Abraham Lincoln's famous portrait, with liberty to the left, in God we trust above, and the year 1981 beneath his portrait. On the reverse is the Lincoln Memorial, surrounded by United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and 1 cent. When you look at a circulated 1981 penny today, you are looking at a small survivor from an era when the cent was an essential part of everyday transactions. The coin may be inexpensive in ordinary condition, but its history is still fascinating. And when collectors examine thousands of coins, they sometimes encounter examples with unusual characteristics that deserve a closer look. One of the first things you should check on a 1981 cent is the mint mark. Look directly beneath the date and inspect that small area carefully. Depending on where the coin was struck, you may encounter a mint mark such as D or S, while Philadelphia cents from this era can appear without a mint mark. Never assume that a missing mint mark automatically means an error. Knowing the normal production practices of the period is essential. This is one of the most important lessons for anyone searching pocket change. Something that looks strange is not necessarily rare. A collector must first determine what is normal before deciding whether something is unusual. If your 1981 cent has a mint mark, record exactly what you see. If it does not, do not immediately assume you have discovered a major rarity. Instead, continue examining the coin and compare it with known examples. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where two identical-looking dates can become very different coins. A heavily circulated 1981 cent may have worn details, numerous scratches, discoloration, and contact marks. A coin that has spent years protected from circulation may retain much sharper details and stronger original surfaces. Collectors use grading standards to evaluate these differences. The better preserved the coin, the more attention it may receive, particularly if it is an exceptionally high-grade example. However, there is a major warning here. Never confuse artificial shine with genuine mint condition. Some people polish old pennies because they believe making them brighter will increase their value. In reality, cleaning and polishing can damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. If you find a 1981 cent that looks dirty or naturally aged, it is usually better to leave it alone than to experiment with household cleaners or abrasive materials. Another fascinating area is the possibility of a mint error or variety. The mint produces enormous quantities of coins, and although modern manufacturing is highly controlled, mistakes and unusual die characteristics can occur. Collectors may become interested in features such as genuine doubling, unusual die characteristics, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or other recognized minting anomalies. But there is a major difference between an error created during production and damage that happened after the coin entered circulation. A scratch from another coin, a dent from a machine, corrosion, chemical damage, or a mark created by someone deliberately altering the coin is not automatically a valuable mint error. This is especially important with worn 1981 cents because years of circulation can create countless strange-looking marks. If you see something unusual, compare it against reliable references and, if necessary, have it examined by someone experienced in numismatics. The reverse of the 1981 cent deserves just as much attention as the front. Turn the coin over and look closely at the Lincoln Memorial. Examine the columns, the building's outline, the lettering, and the surrounding fields. On a circulated coin, wear can make fine details appear weak or partially missing. Dirt and oxidation can also make the design difficult to interpret. If you notice unusual shapes or apparent doubling, use magnification and good lighting to determine whether the feature is actually part of the original strike. The strongest discoveries are not based on simply saying, "This looks weird." They are based on identifying a specific characteristic and comparing it with documented examples. That is the difference between casual coin searching and serious coin hunting. Every strange-looking mark is a reason to investigate, but not every strange-looking mark is a valuable error. The color and surface of a 1981 Lincoln cent can also tell you something about its history. Copper-based cents can change appearance over time because of circulation, storage, exposure to moisture, and environmental conditions. A coin may appear reddish, brown, or somewhere between those tones depending on its preservation and surface history. Collectors can pay close attention to original coloration, especially when evaluating high-grade examples. But once again, be careful. A coin that has been artificially treated to make it brighter is not the same as a naturally preserved coin. If you find an old penny with an attractive original appearance, avoid rubbing or polishing it. Even fingerprints can leave oils on a coin's surface, so handle collectible pieces by their edges whenever possible. Your goal should always be preservation, not restoration. There is another important lesson hidden inside the 1981 penny. Rarity and value are not the same thing. A coin can be interesting without being extremely valuable, and a coin can be valuable for reasons that have nothing to do with its age alone. Collectors consider supply, condition, demand, varieties, errors, provenance, and auction history. If someone tells you that every 1981 penny is worth thousands of dollars, be skeptical. Most ordinary circulated examples are not rare treasures, but that does not mean you should ignore them completely. A coin worth only its face value can still be useful for learning how to identify dates, mint marks, varieties, and condition. And the more coins you examine, the better your eye becomes. That experience is one of the most valuable tools a collector can develop. Imagine sorting through a large container of Lincoln cents. At first, every coin looks almost identical. After examining hundreds of them, however, you begin noticing small differences. You recognize dates more quickly. You know exactly where to look for mint marks. You become familiar with normal wear patterns. You begin recognizing damage versus genuine mint characteristics. Suddenly, what once looked like a pile of pennies becomes a collection of clues. This is why coin hunting can be so addictive. You are not simply searching for money. You are searching for something unusual hiding among ordinary objects. The 1981 Lincoln cent is a perfect example of how a common-looking coin can encourage you to slow down and become more observant. If you believe your 1981 cent has something unusual, document it before doing anything else. Take clear photographs of the obverse and reverse under good lighting. Take additional close-up photographs of the date, mint mark, and suspicious area. Do not clean the coin. Do not scrape the surface. Do not try to flatten it or repair it. Then compare your observations with reputable numismatic references. If the feature still appears significant, consider consulting a professional coin dealer or a recognized grading and authentication service. Professional examination can be especially useful when a suspected error or variety could potentially affect the value. Remember that an expert does not simply look at a coin and guess. Proper attribution involves identifying the characteristics and determining whether they match a known variety or error. The most exciting part of searching for a 1981 Lincoln cent is that you are participating in a tradition that millions of collectors have enjoyed for generations. People search coin jars, old collections, inherited boxes, bank rolls, and pocket change because the next interesting discovery could be sitting right beside an ordinary penny. You might find nothing unusual for a long time, and that is completely normal. Then one day you notice a detail that makes you stop and say, "Wait a minute, what is that?" That moment is what keeps collectors searching. The important thing is to approach the hobby with curiosity rather than unrealistic expectations. Not every penny will pay your bills, but every penny can teach you something about American history, manufacturing, economics, and the art of numismatics. So before you spend that 1981 Lincoln cent, give it one careful examination. Check the date, Inspect the mint mark area, study Lincoln's portrait, examine the lettering, and then turn it over and investigate the Lincoln Memorial. Look for genuine characteristics rather than random scratches or damage. Pay attention to condition, but never clean the coin simply because it looks dirty. If something seems unusual, preserve it and research it. And most importantly, remember that a coin's value cannot be determined accurately from the year alone. The market, condition, authenticity, variety, error status, and collector demand all matter. A normal 1981 cent may remain a normal penny, but a particularly interesting example can become a fascinating addition to a collection. And that brings us to the end of coin number 2, but our countdown is far from finished. We have already looked at the 1973 Lincoln cent and now the 1981 Lincoln cent, and each coin has shown us the same important lesson. Never stop at the date. Look deeper. Study the surfaces. Check the mint mark. Learn the difference between damage and genuine mint errors. Most importantly, do not let exaggerated claims convince you that every old penny is automatically worth a fortune. The real power comes from knowledge. So keep searching those coin jars, check your pocket change, and inspect those old cents before spending them. Because somewhere among millions of ordinary Lincoln cents, the details are what separate the everyday coins from the truly fascinating ones, and our next coin is waiting to be examined. Now we arrive at coin number 3 in our exciting Lincoln cent hunt, and this time we are examining the 1986 D Lincoln cent from the United States of America. If you have a 1986 penny with a small D mint mark beneath the date, do not rush to spend it just because it looks dirty, dark, scratched, or completely ordinary. The 1986 D cent is a fascinating example of how coin collectors look beyond the face value of a coin. Most circulated examples are common and are not automatically worth large sums simply because they are from 1986. But that does not mean every 1986 D cent should be ignored. Collectors examine these coins for condition, unusual characteristics, varieties, genuine mint errors, and exceptionally preserved examples. That is what makes searching through old change so exciting. You are not assuming that every penny is a fortune. You are learning how to recognize the coin that deserves a second look. So take that 1986 D penny out of your change jar, place it under a good light, and get ready to examine the details that could make one example more interesting than another. The 1986 D Lincoln cent was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why you will see the letter D beneath the date on normal examples produced there. The Lincoln cent itself has an extraordinary history, beginning with the introduction of the Lincoln design in 1909. By 1986, Americans had already been using Lincoln cents for generations, and the coin had become one of the most familiar pieces of money in the country. On the front of your 1986 D cent, you will find Abraham Lincoln's portrait facing right, with liberty beside him, in God we trust above, and the date 1986 below. Turn the coin over and you will see the Lincoln Memorial surrounded by United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and 1 cent. Every one of these details gives you something to examine. A dirty coin can hide small features, so patience is especially important when you are trying to determine whether your example is ordinary or deserves further research. The first feature you should verify is the date and mint mark. Make sure the coin really says 1986 and that the small letter beneath the date is a D. The mint mark tells you that the coin was produced at Denver rather than Philadelphia. This may sound like a simple observation, but identifying the exact coin is the foundation of proper coin research. Never rely on a blurry photograph or a quick glance. Use magnification if necessary, especially when the coin is heavily worn. Also remember that a D mint mark by itself does not make the coin rare. Millions of cents were produced for circulation, so the presence of a D should be viewed as an identification feature rather than an automatic indication of great value. The real question is what else is happening on the coin. Is it unusually well preserved? Does it show a recognized variety? Is there a genuine minting error? Does the coin have characteristics that separate it from normal examples? Those are the questions that can make your investigation much more interesting. Now take a close look at Abraham Lincoln's portrait. Start with the highest points of the design because these areas normally show wear first. Examine Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat, and surrounding fields. Look for normal circulation wear and distinguish it from unusual characteristics. A coin that has been carried in pockets for decades may have countless small marks. Some scratches can look dramatic under magnification, but they are simply post-mint damage. Collectors need to understand this difference because a damaged coin and a genuine mint error are two completely different things. If you see a strange line or indentation, ask yourself whether it could have happened after the coin left the mint. Could it have been struck by another coin? Could it have been damaged by a machine, a hard surface, or chemicals? The more carefully you investigate, the less likely you are to mistake damage for a valuable error. The reverse of the 1986 D-cent deserves just as much attention. Turn the coin over and carefully inspect the Lincoln Memorial. Look at the columns, roofline, lettering, and surrounding fields. Examine 1 cent and United States of America, then inspect the tiny details around EPLURIBUSUNUM. On a heavily circulated coin, some of these details may be weak or partially worn away. Dirt can make them even harder to see. If you notice something that appears doubled, distorted, or unusually positioned, take a closer look before reaching any conclusions. Genuine varieties and mint errors require specific characteristics, and many supposed errors are actually caused by circulation damage or the effects of corrosion. This is why comparison is so important. A photograph of a normal 1986 D-cent can help you understand what ordinary production looks like, making unusual characteristics easier to recognize. One of the biggest mistakes people make when searching for valuable coins is assuming that dirt means rarity. A dirty coin is simply a coin that has accumulated material or developed surface changes through storage and exposure. Dirt does not automatically increase value, and cleaning does not automatically increase value either. In fact, aggressive cleaning can hurt a coin. If your 1986 D-cent has been sitting in soil, a garage, an old drawer, or a container for decades, its surface may have changed significantly. Scrubbing it with a brush, rubbing it with a cloth, or applying household chemicals can create permanent damage. If you believe the coin may be important, leave it in its current condition and have it evaluated properly. Experienced collectors would generally rather see an original coin with honest surfaces than a coin that has been polished until it looks unnaturally bright. Condition is another major factor in determining collector interest. Think about how many times a circulated penny might have changed hands during its lifetime. It could have traveled through stores, vending machines, cash registers, pockets, wallets, and coin containers. Every interaction can leave marks. As coins circulate, their surfaces gradually become less pristine. On the other hand, a coin that was preserved carefully may retain sharper details and stronger original surfaces. High-grade examples can be considerably more desirable than heavily worn examples of the same date and mint mark. But grading is not something that should be guessed simply by looking at the coin and saying it appears shiny. Professional grading involves established standards, and cleaning or artificial treatments can negatively affect a coin's desirability. If you think you have an exceptionally preserved 1986 D-cent, treat it carefully and consider professional evaluation before making claims about its value. There is also an important lesson about mint errors. Genuine errors can be exciting because they occur during the manufacturing process and can create unusual coins that collectors actively study. Possible error categories can include off-center strikes, clip planchets, die-related problems, and other recognized production anomalies. But not every unusual-looking coin is an error. A coin can become bent, scratched, corroded, discolored, or damaged long after it leaves the mint. Sometimes a mark appears to be doubled when it is actually caused by wear or mechanical damage. This is why you should never decide that your 1986 D cent is a major rarity based on one strange mark. Document what you see, compare it with trustworthy references, and seek expert attribution when appropriate. The goal is accuracy, not simply finding an exciting story. Another feature worth studying is the color and overall appearance of the copper-based cent. Depending on its storage history and exposure to the environment, a 1986 D penny can appear brown, reddish-brown, or more reddish when well preserved. The surfaces may also show discoloration from environmental exposure. Collectors can care about original color and surface quality when evaluating high-grade coins. But a coin that has been artificially bright should not be confused with a naturally preserved example. If you find a penny with attractive surfaces, resist the temptation to make it even shinier. Coin collecting rewards preservation. The safest approach is to handle potentially collectible coins by their edges, keep them in appropriate holders, and avoid unnecessary contact with the surfaces. Your objective is to protect the evidence that tells the coin's story. Imagine finding a 1986 D cent in a pile of ordinary pennies. You pull it out because the date catches your eye. Then you notice the D mint mark. You turn it over and see the Lincoln Memorial. At first, nothing seems unusual, but instead of spending it immediately, you take a closer look. You examine the date, mint mark, portrait, lettering, rim, and reverse. You compare it with another 1986 D cent. Suddenly, you notice that the two coins do not look exactly the same. Maybe the difference is simply circulation wear, or perhaps there is a feature worth investigating. This is how the learning process begins. The exciting part is not guaranteeing that you will discover a fortune. The exciting part is developing the ability to recognize something unusual when it actually appears. The more coins you study, the better your eye becomes. If your 1986 D cent appears to have a possible error or variety, preserve it exactly as you found it. Take photographs of both sides and close-ups of the suspicious area. Avoid cleaning it, polishing it, scratching it, or attempting to remove marks. Then compare your coin with reliable numismatic information. If the characteristic appears significant, consider showing it to a reputable coin dealer or professional authentication and grading service. This can help determine whether the feature is a genuine mint-made characteristic or simply damage. Remember that an online photograph can sometimes be misleading, particularly when lighting creates shadows or reflections. Professional examination is the safest route when a coin appears potentially valuable. And never let a dramatic internet claim pressure you into believing a specific price without evidence. So what should you remember about the 1986 D Lincoln cent? First, the D mint mark identifies Denver production, but the mint mark alone does not make the coin rare. Second, most circulated examples are ordinary coins, so realistic expectations are important. Third, condition can make a major difference in collector interest, especially for exceptionally preserved examples. Fourth, genuine mint errors and varieties require careful identification and should not be confused with damage. And finally, never clean a coin simply because it looks dirty. That old, unattractive surface may be exactly what you need to preserve if the coin turns out to have an interesting characteristic. The best coin hunters are patient, careful, and skeptical of exaggerated claims. They investigate before they celebrate. And that brings us to the end of coin number 3, the 1986 D Lincoln cent. It may look like nothing more than an ordinary penny that has been sitting in circulation for decades, but every coin deserves a careful look before you decide its fate. Check the date, confirm the D mint mark, study Lincoln's portrait, examine the Lincoln Memorial, and pay attention to condition and unusual characteristics. Most importantly, remember that valuable coins are identified through evidence, not hype. Now we have reached the final coin in our countdown, and this time we are looking at the 1993 Lincoln cent from the United States of America. At first glance, A 1993 penny may seem far too ordinary to deserve your attention. It is not an extremely old coin. It was made for everyday circulation, and millions of examples have survived. But this is exactly why the 1993 Lincoln cent makes an interesting final entry. Coin collecting is not simply about finding the oldest coin in a jar. It is about recognizing the difference between an ordinary example and one with unusual characteristics, exceptional preservation, or a genuine minting error. So if you have a 1993 1-cent coin sitting in your pocket, coin jar, drawer, or old collection, do not immediately throw it back into circulation. Take a few moments to inspect it carefully, because the details can tell you far more than the date alone. The 1993 Lincoln cent belongs to the long-running Lincoln cent series that has been one of the most recognizable parts of American coinage. By 1993, the Lincoln design had already been familiar to several generations of Americans. On the front of the coin is the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, with "In God We Trust" above, Liberty beside the portrait, and the date 1993 beneath it. The reverse displays the Lincoln Memorial, with United States of America around the top, EPLURIBUSUNUM above the memorial, and 1 cent below. These details may seem simple, but they provide collectors with many areas to inspect. On an ordinary circulated coin, wear and contact marks can soften the design. On a well-preserved example, much sharper details may remain. And on a coin with a genuine mint error or variety, certain features may look different from what you would expect on a normal specimen. The first thing to do with a 1993 Lincoln cent is identify exactly what you have. Look carefully at the date and then inspect the area beneath the date for the mint mark. Depending on where the coin was struck, you may see a D or S mint mark, while Philadelphia cents from this period were produced without a mint mark. This is important because the mint mark tells you where the coin was made, but it does not automatically determine whether the coin is rare. A common mistake among beginning collectors is to believe that any particular mint mark makes a coin extremely valuable. That is not how coin values work. The date, mint, condition, variety, error status, demand, and authenticity all have to be considered together. So start with identification, but do not stop there. Now turn your attention to the condition of your 1993 cent. Has the coin spent years circulating through cash registers, pockets, vending machines, and coin jars? If so, you may see scratches, dents, discoloration, and worn design elements. Those marks tell the story of the coin's journey through everyday commerce. Compare that coin with a 1993 cent that has been carefully stored since the day it was produced. The difference can be dramatic. Collectors place significant importance on preservation, and exceptionally high-grade examples can attract more attention than heavily circulated examples. However, do not make the mistake of assuming that a shiny penny must be valuable. A coin that has been polished or chemically cleaned may look bright, while actually having damaged surfaces. Originality and preservation are much more important than simply making a coin sparkle. One of the most exciting possibilities when examining any Lincoln cent is a genuine mint error. During the manufacturing process, coins can occasionally develop unusual characteristics. Collectors study errors involving the planchet, dies, and striking process, and some unusual examples can become highly desirable. But here is the important part. You must distinguish an authentic mint-made error from ordinary damage. A scratch, gouge, dent, discoloration, or flattened area created after the coin entered circulation is not automatically a valuable error. A coin that has been damaged by machinery or accidentally altered by someone may look strange, but that does not mean it left the mint that way. If your 1993 cent has something unusual, examine it carefully and compare it with documented examples before making any claim about its rarity or value. The reverse of the 1993 cent is especially useful for this kind of examination. Take a close look at the Lincoln Memorial. Study the columns, the building outline, the surrounding lettering, and the open fields. Examine 1 cent and United States of America carefully. Then look at EPLURIBUSUNUM. If the coin is dirty, use good lighting to reveal details, but do not aggressively clean the surface. Dirt can sometimes obscure what you are trying to see, while corrosion or environmental damage can create strange shapes that resemble mint errors. If something appears doubled, distorted, missing, or unusually positioned, compare it with a normal 1993 cent. You want to determine whether the characteristic is actually part of the coin's manufacturing process or simply a result of circulation and environmental exposure. The date itself also deserves careful inspection. When a coin has circulated for decades, numbers can become worn and difficult to read. Sometimes scratches or damage around a date can make it appear as though one number is unusual. Before believing that you have discovered a rare variety, make sure the date has not been altered or damaged. Genuine varieties have identifiable characteristics that can be compared against known references. This is why experienced collectors do not rely on excitement alone. They use photographs, measurements, reference books, auction records, and professional opinions when necessary. If you discover something that looks unusual, document it before touching the coin further. Take clear photographs of the entire coin and close-ups of the date, mint mark, and suspicious area. That information can be extremely helpful when asking an expert for an opinion. Another thing to examine is the rim and edge of your 1993 cent. Look carefully around the outer border of both sides. The rim can sometimes reveal signs of damage or unusual striking characteristics. But again, be careful about what you are seeing. A flattened edge caused by a machine or impact is not automatically an error. A genuine mint error must be consistent with the manufacturing process and should generally show characteristics that make sense based on how the coin was struck. This is why coin collecting requires both curiosity and skepticism. If someone tells you that a strange-looking edge automatically means your penny is worth thousands of dollars, do not accept the claim without evidence. Ask what specific error it is, how it occurred, and whether comparable authenticated examples have actually sold for significant amounts. Your 1993 penny may also show different shades depending on its condition and storage history. Copper-based cents can naturally develop different colors over time. Some may appear brown, some reddish-brown, and some may retain more of their original reddish appearance when well preserved. Environmental exposure can change the surface as well. This is another reason you should avoid cleaning collectible coins. Rubbing, polishing, or applying chemicals can permanently alter the surface and potentially reduce collector interest. If you believe your 1993 cent might be special, preserving its current condition is usually more important than making it look attractive. Handle it by the edges, keep it protected from unnecessary contact, and consider using an appropriate coin holder if you plan to store it. Now imagine finding a 1993 cent in your everyday change. You see the date, notice that it is several decades old, and almost spend it without thinking. But instead, you take a closer look. You check the mint mark. You examine Lincoln's portrait. You inspect the lettering. Then you flip the coin over and study the memorial. You compare the coin with another 1993 example and start noticing differences in wear, color, and surface quality. That simple act of paying attention is what coin hunting is all about. You do not need expensive equipment to begin. A good light, a basic magnifier, patience, and reliable information can take you surprisingly far. Over time, you learn what normal coins look like, and once you know what normal looks like, genuine abnormalities become easier to recognize. If your 1993 cent appears to have an unusual feature, do not clean it or attempt to repair it. Preserve the coin exactly as you found it. Photograph both sides and make detailed close-ups. Research the characteristic using reputable numismatic sources, and if it still appears significant, consider having the coin examined by a qualified professional. A reputable dealer or professional grading and authentication service can help determine whether the coin has a recognized variety or mint error, and can evaluate its condition. This is especially important when you see dramatic online claims about ordinary pennies being worth enormous amounts. Real coin values are based on evidence, not sensational headlines. Auction results can vary widely, and a price claimed online may apply only to an exceptionally rare, authenticated, high-grade example, rather than to every coin with the same date. And now, after examining 4 Lincoln cents, the 1973, 1981, 1986 D, and finally the 1993, we come to the most important lesson of the entire video. Do not assume that every old penny is a fortune, but also do not ignore your coins without looking at them. Most examples will be ordinary, and that is completely normal. The excitement comes from finding the exceptions. A genuine mint error, an unusual variety, or an exceptionally preserved coin can be far more interesting than a heavily circulated example of the same date. The 1993 Lincoln cent may be common in ordinary condition, but it can still be an excellent coin for learning the fundamentals of collecting. Check the date, identify the mint, examine the condition, study the surfaces, and learn to distinguish genuine mint-made characteristics from damage. So before you spend your next 1993 penny, stop for a moment and look twice. You may discover nothing unusual, and that is perfectly fine. Or you may find a characteristic that deserves further investigation. The real treasure is knowledge, because once you understand how coins are made, how they age, how errors occur, and how collectors evaluate condition, you become much better at recognizing genuinely interesting coins. If you enjoyed this countdown, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next coin hunt. Keep checking your pocket change, old coin jars, inherited collections, and forgotten drawers. You never know what you might discover, but always remember, a coin's date alone does not guarantee a fortune. The real story is in the details, and sometimes the smallest detail is the one that makes you stop and look twice.